So, I spoke in a neutral accent as opposed to my southern dialect of English, as it would potentially be difficult enough for Spanish speakers, whether Puerto Rican or Mexican dialects, to understand the phonology of the target language. As we know, if I am code switching from my neutral dialect to my southern dialect of English, that will negatively affect their development of the target language, providing hindrances as it is not clear and consistent. My experience has provided me with similar conclusions drawn by scholars in the sociolinguistic realm from data they utilize from the SPADE, Speech Across Dialects of English Consortium. After conducting their extensive study, they asserted that, and I quote, dialects of English differ substantially from each other in the size of the voicing effect, whilst individual speakers varied little relative to their particular dialect. Tanner, Sondriger, and Stewart Smith and Fruhlwald, 2020. Now, the voicing effect posits that longer vowel sounds precede distinct consonant utterances, and the inverse is true also. It's so with a less distinct consonant ending, the vowel sound would be shorter, like bead and beat. So my speaking in a neutral accent consistently is optimal when it came to my students in the mock lesson. The neutrality of my dialect is vital, according to my experience in teaching second language speakers, but it is crucial that I do not constantly switch from one dialect of English to another. In the country of my teaching, language learners prefer an East Coast accent over a West Coast accent and dread the Southern drawl. Therefore, I have mastered the aforementioned neutrality common to English teachers in our respective country and, language teaching community. It is difficult enough to create a spoken cognitive representation of speech sounds for young native speakers of any language. Therefore, I dare not confound my students. I also speak slowly to ensure students understand my speech, pronunciation of graphemes, or phonemes, of course, cadence, and the grouping of syllables orthographically and phonetically. As we will see, the cognitive representation of the target language is heavily dependent upon the correct utterances of phonemes in said language. In regard to spoken language, the effect variations in phonology can have, or the effect variations in phonology can have upon such can depend on the dialect of the target oral language, as we have already seen, and also depends on the origin language of the learner. The voicing effect will reflect the pattern of their home language. The aforementioned researchers yielded, and I quote, comparing English and French monolinguals with bilinguals, observed that English monolinguals maintained a substantially larger VE, or voicing effect, than French monolinguals, whilst the French-English bilinguals also produced the shorter French-style pattern instead of adapting to the larger English voice effect pattern. That's Tanner et al., page 3, 2020. This demonstrates the difference that variations in dialects across speech patterns can have on oral language. Interestingly, one may cross to another dialect in the register, and this may manifest in written text produced by the language learner according to the dialect of their teachers, whether they have one or many. They may pull from these registers akin to one accessing schema and write cool in one instance while writing spectacular in another. It all depends upon the dialect from which the learner derived their target language and the dialect from which they learned their native language. When it comes to dialects of native tongues, certain experimenters who studied the phenomena of second language acquisition discovered interesting information about how learners use phonemes from their native tongue. They state that, and I quote, the study of English pronunciation plays a vital role in English language learning. However, in the process of learning English, learners will unconsciously compare the dialect sounds of their birthplace with the English pronunciation. When the pronunciation rules of the two are different, learners usually move the dialect speech rules they have already been that have already been learned to the English phonetics first and generate a large number of negative migrations which hinders the learning of English speech. Tian Kun, 2021. With clear diction and orthographic mapping of phonemes and syllables, we can ensure the students that struggle with these variations in dialects from their mother tongues do not experience negative migration. I would ensure to model not only proper pronunciation alongside ensuring phonemic awareness through systematic literacy instruction, but I would also ensure that semantic understanding and syntactic order, as negative transfer can rearrange word order, that a student would utilize in their target language of English if their native tongue were Chinese or even Arabic. Tian Kun expounds on this thought stating, negative transfer is a form in which the learner uses the rules or patterns of the native language to cause errors or inconsistent language rules in the course of learning the target language, thus hindering the acquisition of the target language, such as differences in Chinese and English word order. That's Tian Kun, 2021. Thankfully, there are positive migrations in language learning, to help combat the negative migrations. Anticipating how negative migration can not only affect a student or affect how a student learns their language will assist in cultivating readers' characteristics by motivating learners, language learners to break down text respective to their complexity. Understanding how to combat against one's dialect negatively migrating rules that do not apply to their target language will help to ensure they develop excellent written and oral skills in their target language. Some of the evidence-based practices I mentioned in the mock lesson, like activating prior knowledge, also gives the language learner a sense of purpose, which is quite impactful toward their comprehension and creates a high level of engagement. All right, so I hope that was a good summary of what happened in the lesson and an explanation of how, I was demonstrating, the concepts contained within, said lesson. All right.